Now, what were the Skeptics like? Was there a rush straight for the jam croissants? Are they a coffee crowd? Are they Earl Grey tea crowd? What kind of people are here today?
Well, I don't know. I've been at the veggie table, so...
And now the veggie table, are they the people that look a bit pale, they could use a bit more iron?
Yes, most definitely, yes.
Now, where have they put that this year? Has it been in a cupboard?
The iron.
Oh, is this the veggie table?
Yeah, this is vegetarian and gluten-free, so the dietary requirements downstairs, so I shoot everyone else upstairs. Yep.
Oh, okay,
yep.
right. See, I thought this was a normal table, but no, it's special.
Special. No. Well, the vegetarian side of it isn't, because it's the same. There's no meat and pastries.
Okay, well, you're doing a fine job, and no one's been poisoned by nitrates so far.
Okay, yep. Not so far.
So far.
Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 219 for the 29th of December 2012. The last Skeptic Zone for 2012. Richard Saunders here with you from the Bay Area, San Francisco. What a beautiful day it is outside. Well, it's overcast, but I just love these crispy, cool winters. On this week's show, one of my favourite topics, monsters. Oh yes, when I was much younger, I used to love hearing about lake monsters and UFOs and all that sort of stuff. Well, today we're going to look at lake monsters, specifically the monster in Lake Champlain, which is tucked right up there in the northeast part of the United States, up in the New England area, sort of around Vermont. And I think it's also a bit in New York State. Anyway, Lake Champlain hosts a monster, or so it's said. We're going to be talking to researcher Robert Bartholomew, who has written a book, The Untold Story of Champ, A Social History of America's Loch Ness Monster. What a fascinating area of study it is. Lake monsters, whether they're real or not, it's still a really interesting part of the skeptical world. That's coming up at the top of the show. And following that, it's Maynard back in Melbourne with Rebecca Watson, who was in Melbourne for the Australian Skeptics National Convention. And typical for Maynard, this interview ranges all over the place. Not what you would expect. Coming up later on in the show. Now, happy birthday to Brian Dunning, who had a birthday in the last couple of days. And speaking of Brian Dunning, he tells me that the Chinese Skeptoid is doing exceedingly well, with thousands and thousands of downloads every day. Wonderful news, Brian. Wonderful news. And for you Brian Dunning fans in Australia, especially in the Australian Capital Territory, the Canberra Skeptics invites you to a free screening of Here Be Dragons, an introduction to critical thinking. Now that's going to be on Sunday, January the 20th, from midday until 2 o'clock. The location is Questacon at King Edward Terrace. Now people in Canberra will know where the Questacon is. It's a very famous building there in Canberra. For more information, visit www.canberraskeptics.org.au and click the link for Canberra Skeptics Social Function and free screening of Here Be Dragons. Now, before we kick off the Skeptic Zone, I thought I'd give you a mystical, not mystical at all, insight into 2013. What are my predictions? Gained through magical insights of just plain guessing. Well, let's crank up that spooky music and find out. Published on the 25th of December 2012. Non-psychic or just plain guessing predictions for 2013 by Richard Saunders. 1. A former Australian Prime Minister will die and the family will be offered a state funeral. 2. Queen Elizabeth II will continue to reign throughout 2013. Others may predict it, but she will not abdicate. 3. Many self-proclaimed psychics, astrologers and mystics will continue to dodge the $100,000 prize from Australian Skeptics. Excuses will include I don't have to prove my powers to anyone. The prize is fake. The skeptics will cheat. You cannot test psychic powers with science. I don't want or need the money. The skeptics won't test me. If I win, I reserve the right to sue the skeptics. My guides tell me not to apply for the prize. For those who believe, no proof is necessary. The skeptics only offer the prize to those who they know will fail. The skeptics do not want to part with the cash. If the prize was real, someone would have won it 30 years ago. You cannot prove love. 4. The assassination of a world leader will shock millions. 5. Major flooding along the east coast of Australia. 6. Wildfires in the USA have thousands evacuating. 7. Volcanic activity disrupts flights. 8. A relatively young actor dies in tragic circumstances. 9. The Australian dollar continues to be high. 10. Polio, despite the efforts of those who would rather see it thrive, will be almost wiped off the face of the earth. Well, there you go. There's some predictions for the year 2013. But before the year 2013 rolls around, I think we better all listen to the Skeptic Zone. I'm going to run out of this room, run up the stairs, jump into the car, drive to the BART station, take the BART to downtown San Francisco, walk along the piers until I find some clam chowder in a sourdough bowl. Yum, yum. Now, while I'm doing that, I'll let you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Robert Bartholomew is a medical sociologist who holds a PhD from James Cook University in Queensland, Australia. He has published over 60 articles in peer-reviewed journals, including the British Medical Journal, Medical Journal of Australia, the Journal of Cognitive Psychotherapy, and the International Journal of Social Psychiatry. He is the co-author of the Encyclopedia of Extraordinary Social Behaviour, and describes himself as a sympathetic skeptic who requires a body or DNA evidence as absolute proof. He has also co-authored the book Bigfoot in New York and New England, Documented Evidence Stranger Than Fiction. A former university instructor and researcher, he has lived with the Malay people in Malaysia and taught Aborigines in outback Australia. Robert's latest book is The Untold Story of Champ, a social history of America's Loch Ness Monster. And joining me on the line now from beautiful Auckland, New Zealand, is the author, Robert Bartholomew. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Richard.
Well, it's really great to chat with you. I was only in Auckland a few days ago, matter of fact. What a beautiful city it is. Are there monsters in New Zealand?
Well, there's the Coromandel Man, which is New Zealand's equivalent of the Bigfoot. There are these phantom moa sightings on the South Island. There are phantom puma and big cat reports here. So New Zealand has its representative monsters, and of course, lake monsters, sea serpents galore, especially during the 17 and 1800s.
Really? That's interesting. I never knew. I know Australia has got its fair share of bush monsters and weird creatures, and I think even a lake monster somewhere along the way. I think there must be just about everywhere in the world you can find these things, but your interest at the moment, apart from an abiding interest in the topic generally, is the title of your book, of course, The Untold Story of Champ. Now, this is the monster, apparently, that lives in Lake Champlain.
That's right, and this is one of the great untold stories of American history. If people think they know the history of the Champlain monster, they need to think again, because there's an entire history here that's been kept from the public. Back in the 1880s and 1890s, the Lake Champlain monster was a household name across the United States and in many parts of the world. It was the equivalent of Loch Ness then. Loch Ness didn't really catch on until the mid-1930s with some big sightings, and it caught on because they had a ready-made audience, as there were over 50 countries in the Commonwealth, and those reports were distributed in all those countries because they would reprint. So that's how Champ became this household name, and then that's how the Loch Ness Monster superseded Champ.
That's interesting, because I visit many schools in my travels, and I always ask the children if they've heard of UFOs, Bigfoot, and the Loch Ness Monster, and they all have, absolutely all have. You know, I haven't asked them about Champ, but I bet if I did ask them, I bet not many people, especially children these days, would have heard about it. Why do you think that is exactly? Do you think only because the Loch Ness Monster is far more popular? During
the last 2 decades, the Champlain monster has really come into its own. There's been a lot of TV documentaries on History and Discovery Channel, specifically on Champ. And in 2003, there was a sensational report that was broadcast on the Discovery Channel that this woman, I call her the Champ Whisperer in the book, Elizabeth von Muggenthaler, she claimed to have heard the creature, or this large mammal, under the water in Lake Champlain, and they made a big deal about these findings. And so because of this new information about this creature using bioacoustics to get around Lake Champlain, there's been really a renewed interest in Champ in the last 2 decades.
That's interesting. Have you visited the lake?
I grew up at the base of Lake Champlain in tiny Whitehall, New York, the birthplace of the United States Navy. Of course, there are other places that claim to be the birthplace, too, so we have multiple realities there. Interesting.
So when was the last time you had a look for the monster?
That would have been, last time I was there was in 2005.
Yep, good enough.
It's a fascinating history. And most people today, when you mention the Lake Champlain monster, I would dare say a lot of those school children would be familiar with Champ if they were maybe 10, 12 years of age, if they watch History of Discovery.
Okay.
Because arguably the world's most famous lake monster photograph was taken on Lake Champlain. Up until 1994, it was the famous surgeon's photo that was taken by supposedly by a doctor at Loch Ness. But that turned out to have been a hoax, which was uncovered in 1994, and that left Champ as what people say in a lot of books and magazine articles and on these TV documentaries as the famous Manzi photo being arguably the best lake monster photo ever.
Now, that photograph is an interesting one. I've had a look at it myself. It is famous. It's well, when you look at it, it sort of looks like maybe something living or like a reptile with a bit of a hump or a back and something that could be said to be a head poking out of the water.
That's right. And when you look at this stuff, when you look at UFOs, ghosts, Bigfoot, all this stuff, it looks interesting on the surface, no pun intended here with Champ, but the Manzi photo, when I first looked at that, I said, wow, that's really interesting. But when you dig deeper and look below the surface, there are a lot of strange things about that photo, and I mean a lot of strange things. I can mention a couple for you. Sandra Manzi said that she threw away the negative. Now, this was back in 1977 when people had negatives. I can remember, unfortunately, that you had negatives for photographs. I won't ask you if you remember or not. But,
I do. Don't worry, I do. Yeah.
Richard, just imagine you take a photo of what you believe to be a living dinosaur and you throw away the negative. And the negative is the only thing that can verify the photo because you can blow it up, that and the location.
Yeah.
It's very odd. And Manzi later told a well-known scientist, her husband, Mr. Manzi, told a well-known scientist in Vermont, the naturalist for the state of Vermont, that she didn't throw out the negative. And that's what I found and uncovered in my book. He said they either burned or buried it in their backyard.
What?
Now, you can't make this stuff up. It's kind of like the Coke bottle in that movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy, the evil thing. They apparently considered it evil, so they burned or buried it in the backyard. But she claims they didn't burn or bury it in the backyard. It's very odd. Now, he passed away a few years after the photo was taken, so there's no way to interview him again unless we have a seance or something. And so, and these things go on and on. For example, if you don't have the negative, the next best thing is to have the location.
Yeah.
But the Manzi said they couldn't remember the exact location. It was somewhere between St. Albans, Vermont, and the Canadian border. And apologists for the creature say, well, that's over 500 miles of shoreline. That's true, but there's only 20 miles of shoreline between St. Albans and the Canadian border. It's not like it's a needle in a haystack scenario. And what most people don't realize, and was never reported by other lake monster researchers, was not only that they claimed to have burned or buried the negative in the backyard, but what was never reported as well was that in July of 1980, the Manzis came up from Connecticut on a 10-day trip on Lake Champlain, and a key reason they came up was to look for the location of where they snapped that photo, supposedly.
Right.
Remarkably, when they arrived, and this has never been reported before, they never looked for the location. They were there for 10 days, and they never looked for the location.
That's interesting, and one would wonder why exactly they wouldn't do that. And looking at the photograph right now, and listeners, you can easily look at this photograph. All you have to do is Google Mansi, M-A-N-S-I, photograph, champ, you'll find it. You could probably find that location, judging by the trees and the shoreline, I think. You'd have a good stab at it anyway.
But you're only talking 20 miles of shoreline, and people have been through there on boats and in walking that, and they still haven't found it. But what's interesting is when they left, she was there, and the object was in view for 5 minutes, and she snapped just one photo. So, Richard, if space aliens landed where you are now on the lawn, and you grabbed your camera, and they stayed there for several minutes, I'm guessing that you would snap more than one photograph. And then they said right after this, when they left, they went to get food. That's not necessarily what I would have done, but they went to get food, made them hungry. Okay, so couldn't you at least identify a landmark, like a mountain, a distinct house, a sign, or where they ate? But they have not been able to find any of that. And I know the lake pretty well, and that doesn't look like any part of the lake up there at all.
That's interesting, because to the casual observer like me looking at that photograph, I would have no way of knowing that the lake doesn't quite look like that. I just assumed that was the lake.
It actually looks like the Narrows to me, which is down much closer to the bottom of the lake. You know what's also interesting? In the early 1980s, Manzi, and I'm doing this research as an investigative reporter here, looking at everything that's been written and interviewing people and looking at these documents. And Manzi told several reporters in the early 1980s, Mrs. Manzi, in separate interviews, that after the photo came back from developing, she pinned it to her kitchen bulletin board, and it stayed there for years until she came out with it. Well, in 1992, she gave an interview face-to-face with a reporter for the Glens Falls, New York Post-Star, John Lerner. And she told him that when the image came back from the photomat, she hid the photo in an album, and it stayed there for years. They never took it out. It's just, and you have to ask yourself, is this faulty memory? And people do have faulty memory, and that happens.
Yeah.
On the other hand, this is what you might expect to happen if somebody fabricated a story. It's just very odd, and the oddities just keep flowing. when you look at that photo. Can I say it's a hoax? I can't say it's a hoax. But what I can say is there was some very interesting information that didn't put the photo in good light that has not been reported by cryptozoologists before. And these cryptozoologists, such as Joe Zarzinski, who wrote the book Champ Beyond the Legend, he never put that in his book. And he concluded that Champ was likely, based on that photo, that was a genuine photo. That's what he concluded.
That's interesting, and it sort of brings up a broader issue revolving around the general area of the unknown or the paranormal, we might say, with an interesting sort of tangent here when we're talking about monsters and so forth. What is it about people like cryptozoologists? Is it their mindset to go out and prove these things are real, as opposed to what you and I might do just to go out to see, well, what is the real story, what real or not?
Well, I want to make it clear I'm not a debunker, and I found some really interesting sightings from the 1870s and 1880s, which I've reported in great detail, from very credible witnesses, and it's possible Champ may be out there in the lake. If I were a betting person, to paraphrase Arthur C. Clarke, I might put $10 on the existence of Champ, put $40 that Champ doesn't exist, and keep the rest and put it in my pocket, because to a certain extent, it's nice to have this mystery. It's part of regional folklore. But to get back to your question, it's interesting. In recent years, you've got all these paranormal groups that have popped up across the United States looking for ghosts. You've got UFO groups that have been around for a long time. You've got these Bigfoot groups and other cryptozoological groups, and Champ would fall under that. Yeah. And what I've noticed about these groups, and it's very evident, is that you get a lot of infighting and a lot of rivalries and sordid feuds between these people. I steer completely clear of these groups. And what I find interesting is, I think it's kind of like the movie Highlander. There can be only one. Everyone wants to be the first one to prove that ghosts are real, or prove that Champ exists, or that there's an ET out there. And it's interesting. And, if there's a ghost, it's not just – there's a big emotional attachment here. It's not just that there's a ghost, but it's potentially proof of life after death. Mm. We come into contact and prove that there are space aliens. Well, perhaps they could give us their technology, and we could be elevated to the immortal realm of the gods, so to speak. And then you ask yourself, well, what's the big power with Champ? I think Champ is an anti-scientific symbol in a secular age. Every time somebody sees a Champ sighting and science claims, well, a Champ is not likely to exist, well, it flies in the face of science. Yeah. It says, well, maybe scientists are wrong. And if they're wrong about Champ, maybe they're wrong about religion. Well,
it's the old expression. I get this frequently in my position, and you've probably heard it yourself in arguments with believers, for lack of a better word. They'll often use the tired old expression, well, science doesn't know everything.
Yeah, well, here's my question. When you and not to get off on a tangent, but when we mention ghosts, why aren't ghosts naked?
Yes.
I mean, why do they have clothes on?
Isn't that interesting? I like to also come back, if people ask me about ghosts or they tell me about ghosts, I try to steer them back to science, and I say, well, how do ghosts see things without eyes? Or how do you hear what they have to say, or people hearing them if the ghost hasn't got vocal cords? And I try to bring it back to that. It doesn't get me very far, but at least I try.
Yes. And so in a sense, my conclusion here with the research I did was that, hey, it's possible that Champ does exist. There are some interesting sightings out there. But as a scientist, I need a body, fossils, bones, DNA evidence. I need some concrete proof. If not a smoking gun, then a floating gun. Something floating on the surface. Unfortunately, there's a human side here, a human element, and a really seedy side to Champ, where you get cryptozoologists who have used revisionist history. And maybe the Manzi photo is a photo of Champ. But there's some information out there that's been hidden from the public. And the public has a right to know this information, and that's one of the reasons I published my book. And then you get these researchers like Elizabeth von Muggenthaler, who claims to hear the creature under the water, and you get this guy Dennis J. Hall, who founded Champ Quest in the 1990s. He was the public face of Champ for about 15 years. And when you start digging into his past, you find that he claims to have had 23 separate sightings. And as a child, he claims to have cradled a baby Champ in his arms. And I say to myself, well, Champ may well exist, but don't look to this guy if you're looking for evidence. It reminds me of that housewife in New Mexico who a number of years ago burned a tortilla on her skillet, and she thought she saw the face of Jesus. This guy sees Champ everywhere. Probably in his bathtub, in his sink.
Either that or he's just really, really lucky.
Yeah, well, and the bathroom as well. I don't.
There could be that. Listen, I love this. What I refer to this sort of thing as good old-fashioned skepticism, because it's one of the reasons I got interested in this whole realm when I was only a very small boy. Was things like monsters and Bigfoots and strange searches for mysterious things like this, and the monster there in Lake Champlain is certainly up there with the best of these sort of folklores and stories and mysteries. The book is called The Untold Story of Champ, A Social History of America's Loch Ness Monster. The author is Robert Bartholomew. Now, Robert, where can people get a hold of your book and find out more?
You can get it at bookstores or Amazon online.
That's the place to head, folks. Just search for that title and I'm sure you'll find it. And it looks like a fascinating read. I can't wait to have a look through those pages and find out more myself. Well, Robert, I hope to catch up with you one day. I only live in Sydney, Australia, and it's only across the ditch to Auckland, so maybe one day we can meet up and discuss a few more monsters.
Sure, and you know what that brings up to me when I think of going from Australia to New Zealand? Sea serpents.
Yes.
How come in the 1800s people were seeing sea serpents all over the place? Now they rarely see sea serpents, but they see UFOs.
Well, that's an interesting one. Maybe they all left in UFOs.
You never know.
You never know. Robert Bartholomew, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
Did you see that UFO sighting that made the news? What did that latest study about alternative treatments really say? Is this photo making the rounds real or a hoax? Doubtful News is a unique website featuring news about pseudoscience, the paranormal, anomalies, and questionable claims framed with a skeptical view. Come visit doubtfulnews.com every day for news about cryptozoology, conspiracies, shams, scams, and more. Follow us on Twitter at Doubtful News. Critical thinking is essential in assessing today's news. Doubtful News helps you decide, can you really believe this stuff?
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Well, I'm here in the green room, which you may have heard me mention earlier is not green. And actually, there's no one here except Rebecca Watson. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Oh, look, the feisty Rebecca Watson. That's the word I like seeing put in front of your name. Would you agree with that?
I love the adjective feisty, and it beats most of the adjectives that people usually call me.
Let's talk about science, the science of hair dye. Now, how old were you when you first dyed your hair a fruity, loud colour? What year was that?
Oh, honestly, like 30.
Because we've been discussing how even in the early 90s you couldn't get a good, real solid red to last longer than a day or two, but science has helped us have loud colours now for weeks on an end.
Yeah. Oh, months. No, it never even occurred to me to dye my hair a crazy color, and then I just saw Manic Panic in the store one day, and I thought, yeah, okay. So I did it to my own hair, and it was terrible. I'm not good at it. And so I ended up going to a salon for like the first time in years because I'm cheap and I don't care how I look. And so I went to a salon and I'm like, can you give me, I want my hair to be red, but whatever you do, I don't want it to look natural. I just don't want it to look like I'm trying to be something I'm not. I just want it to be ridiculous, you know?
So this would also be an experiment in perception equals reality. So you change your hair to a weird colour, people then perceive, that Rebecca, she's not like us anymore.
Right, yeah. Well, I do. The attention I get has changed, mostly from strangers, but I love it because the biggest difference has been in how children treat me. Children, particularly little girls, like from the age of, I'd say 4 up to 12, love me immediately. There's a girl at this conference who walked up to me, sat down, and did not leave my side yesterday.
Oh, yes, I saw you with her. Is that because you're like a living doll with really loud hair, or because they see a bright colour, or because they would really love to have the hair too?
I think all those things. I think one of them is that I kind of look like Ariel.
Okay, right. Okay,
so,
that's a good thing.
So I think there's that. And yeah, I think it's like a fun color and that, you know, they think, oh, a fun person. And yeah, so kids love it. And so that makes me happy because I love kids. They're way more fun than adults.
And look, and of course, being an adult polarizer, the hair is a polarizer. And of course, by its very definition, it's a two-edged sword. How do you handle being a polarizer both in personality and perception equals reality? Oh, that Rebecca, she's even though they've never met you.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, the thing is, I don't really like conflict a lot. It makes me nervous. And I like getting along with people. And, you know, if anybody who's met me in person knows that I like to hang out and have fun and, you know, get to know people and have interesting discussions. But of course, a lot of times that can't happen online. You know, people like polarization, I think. And so, you know, in a way, I don't really mind it anymore because even though it still sort of stresses me out sometimes, for the most part, I would rather be polarizing than boring. I'd rather say something that people find interesting and that spurs people to discussion than to say something that just has everybody nodding in agreement. Because if everybody already agrees with you, what's the point of saying it?
That's true. Now, here's a situation that happened in Australia, which I'd like your opinion on. We had a celebrity here, Charlotte Dawson, who had horrible things said about her on Twitter. Not on Facebook, just on Twitter. And she went through a very bad experience with that. And she found out the IP addresses of the people, took a camera crew to them and confronted them in the street and said some of the things to them that she had experienced from them to their face. Would that be the kind of thing you would applaud, or would you ever want to do that?
I don't know that I would personally do it, but I kind of love that because that must have been really awkward and terrible, and I love things like that.
Well, the thing that surprised me is that the people themselves didn't seem to mind being confronted by her. It was almost like you got to see the people that do this kind of thing. That was actually what was the embarrassment for them. The fact that they were getting abuse slammed at them, they kind of took, except there's one guy who worked in a fish and chip shop and he was behind the counter and she came up to him. That was pretty funny. It was almost like he was going to cry, and it was like, okay. But then the other ones took the abuse, but then you look at the kind of people they were and you're going, I wonder why you said you wanted this woman to die. Why would you say something like that?
Well, what kind of abuse was she giving to them, though? Or was she just saying, like...
she was basically repeating to them what they'd said to her. It was mainly a whole bunch of expletives.
Right.
But, it was very personal, and some of it was based on the looks and some of it was based on the fact that... I'm not quite sure what the issue was with. I think the fact that she was a famous woman and they'd picked her as a target for that day.
Yeah. I find it really interesting because I find the psychology of those people to be very interesting. And I've spent a lot of time wondering, like, why do you spend literally all of your time, you know, there are people who have entire blogs that are just about me.
Yeah.
And they catalog everything I do. And I'm like, well, what is your life like that's what you do with it?
Yeah, because you've been on the pointy end of it. So does that make it harder to analyse because you're on the pointy end of it? Would it be better to go, well, let's look at the what's an issue here? You know, you can't do that.
Well, yeah, I'm certainly not an unbiased observer, but I do have a lot of data.
Have you got a theory? Have you got enough raw data to be able to work out what type of person does this and why? Is it a purely misogynistic thing? Is it because the cult of celebrity they don't like? Is it something you're saying that they're objecting to?
I think it depends on the person. I think there are several different categories of person that do this. I think some people might have legitimate medical issues abuse. There's that category, like Dave Mabus, if you're familiar with him.
The Canadian guy.
Yes, yeah. So Mabus is a person who was arrested and tried and put in a mental institution for a time, but then released, and then he went right back to doing what he was doing.
And again, the problem with him wasn't, the threats were pretty nasty, but then there was the chance that maybe he was starting showing up at something, these events, and people, that's what concerned people.
Yeah, he never really bothered. Like, I did get a ton of stuff from him, and sometimes it included specific things like to me, like Rebecca die or something like that. But personally, I was never very threatened by him. But he did turn up at an atheist conference once, and that's when I was like, okay, no, somebody should do something about this. So that's one category. So people who need medical intervention. There are other people who are just, I think, just sad, just have sad lives, and have a lot of hatred. And because I've spent a lot of time wondering, sometimes when I see things that people do to me, I wonder what sort of person would I do that to? Would I ever hate someone so much that I made a blog about them, for instance, and cataloged everything they were doing? I was thinking like Jenny McCarthy or Oprah or like Ben Stein, and I couldn't actually think of anybody that I would be that obsessed over. And so I do wonder if there are some people who just don't have a whole lot going on in their life, and that they sort of latch on to me as something, as a hobby.
With you, it's usually issue-based. It's what the person's doing or their philosophy, and you might touch on it a few times, but you don't make a whole blog to it yet.
Yeah, no, not yet. Maybe one of these days.
Look, I'll tell you what makes me shake my fist at the screen is when you're at work, you're in your cubicle or you're in your little dimly lit thing down the end of town, and someone puts on Facebook a photo of themselves on the beach drinking wine on a sunny day on holidays. That annoys me.
Great, I agree.
At that moment, you could build an entire website devoted to that person, and you hate them because they're having a better time than you. Maybe that's a fractal of what they feel about you.
Also, I have a friend of mine. Actually, I don't know if you're familiar. Jay Novella is a co-host of the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe.
And I've got to say, what I found, there's a FetLife group called I Want Perv on Rebecca Watson. There is no FetLife group I Want a Perv on Jay Novella,
That's right.
Despite the fact demonstrably better looking than you.
I know. You can do something about that.
Yeah, no, I was thinking of starting one, but the problem was that I was expecting it to be a whole bunch of guys on yours, and it was all women.
Right.
And so maybe I'm the guy that needs to start the FetLife Jay Novella group.
I think you should. Someone told me about that group, and at first I said, I don't know how to feel about this. but then a couple of my friends are on FetLife, and they went and checked it out, and they came back, and they're like, no, it's cool. They're all cool. So I was like, oh, all right.
It's okay to have a group of people perving on you as long as they're cool.
Yeah, perv away, pervs. Love you. You keep perving.
It's almost like, they should make you the admin.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah.
Look, it's okay, just as long as I'm the person on the door. But yeah, look, I'm going to work on the J one.
People I hate. People I could start a whole hate thing about. So Jay has a wife, Courtney, who is
I've met her.
Yeah, she's one of the most wonderful, sweetest people on the She's intelligent.
That in itself is really annoying.
Yes, this is what I'm. Okay, listen. She's super smart. She's very sweet. She's one of the kindest people I've ever met.
Let me guess, she's patient too?
She's patient. Well, she's married to Jay Novella.
Oh, okay, right, okay, yeah.
She's gorgeous, and right now she is pregnant. She's got to be like 6-7 months pregnant now. Still gorgeous.
Really?
Hate her.
Yeah.
But I can't hate her because she's so nice. She's the best. I love her.
And look, and everything will probably go perfectly. Everything will go right. The day after the birth, she'll be doing modeling for Vogue.
She's going to immediately lose all the weight. So I'm going to start a blog about Courtney, in which I try to find a flaw somewhere.
And what has everyone been chatting to you here in Melbourne about? I've seen lots of people coming up to you because there's been a little girl pulling your hair, which is a good thing because it's a great colour to be yanked on. What's everyone been talking about? Has there been a topic?
Oh, man, everybody has been so great. And the topic has mostly been just love and support. A lot of people who are fans of SGU or fans of Skeptic or, just like my talk or things like just it's making my head so big. It's not healthy for me, but it's amazing. I love everybody here.
And pretty much everyone I speak to finds there's normally an SGU, the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe link somewhere along the line there. Yeah. I came to the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe through the No Agenda show, actually. I started with the Adam Curry No Agenda show, and iTunes said you might like these other shows. So I listened to you guys, and then I listened to the Skeptic Zone that that I work on now through that. And the show's had such a long history. Where do you see? I don't know why it isn't on free-to-air in the US. I know you'd have to have ads and stuff and that, but why? It's the land, I think I said this to Jay, it's the land of the middlemen. People will sell anything to anyone in America. Why can't the SGU be sold as a regular radio show?
Yeah, that would take a number of things to happen. One, we would need a lot more time and business sense, I think, to have that happen. Because in order to get a show on in the States, you generally need to have it edited down to the millisecond, to the clock. And right now, it's, Steve spends a lot of time editing an hour and 20-something minutes, cutting it down to, I think, an hour for satellite radio. But in that case, there's no commercial breaks that need to be cut in the way it does on commercial radio in the States, or on, well, actually, I'm not familiar with commercial radio so much as public radio. But public radio, you have to adhere to an exact clock, and then you need to sell it in every market. And, it's not easy to do. It would be something that would be great. I would love to have that happen. But right now, with all of us so busy with other things, and they have jobs and families. I don't have a job. This is my job. But I don't have an excuse. I should get on this. I know.
Look, on your way to New Zealand, you've been moving lots of T-shirts down there. You've been having a really good time. I've been asking this of a few people here. I might have asked you, what is the one bit of paranormal, woo, ghosts, UFOs you'd like to be true? What is the one thing that you go, wow, water does have a memory? I mean, what is the kind of thing you would like to actually be real?
Unicorns. Definitely unicorns. Not the nice unicorns, but the vengeful, angry unicorns that stab you.
This is the drunken late night unicorns. Where do these exist? I've only ever seen pink ones on little girls' walls and stuff. I haven't seen these vengeful unicorns now.
No, you need to get with the program. That's the true unicorn. It's an angry unicorn. It's deadly. It will stab you through the chest. Have you seen Cabin in the Woods?
No.
Ooh. I'm not going to say any more because I've already said too much, but It's one of the greatest horror films ever created. Joss Whedon, go watch it.
Okay. And, of course, the big question that's been doing the rounds here in Australia, I think it's even been raised in Parliament, James Bond, bisexual or not?
Oh, totally bisexual. Totally. Yeah. Love it. Yeah. Oh, and every villain he's ever fought has been homosexual.
I mean, yeah, and you as a cat person would have a thing with many of the Roger Moore and Sean Connery villains because they've got the cat going on.
That's true. I'm into him. Sometimes I'm a little more into the villain than I am into James Bond, but what can I say?
And look, we have to finish with a what's next for Rebecca Watson. What is next?
Ooh, you know what? Sleep. I've been traveling every weekend for the last several months at different conferences, and I am so, as much as fun as I'm having here and as much fun as I'm going to have in New Zealand next week, cannot wait to get home with the cats, curl up in bed with a good book, and relax for a month before I have to go somewhere else.
Oh, and I will actually mention one last question because this interview I did with this person probably won't make the show, but I will relate it to you. We're at the meet and greet the other night, and I said, who are you looking forward to meeting? And this gentleman said, I'm looking forward to meeting Rebecca Watson, but she's married, so I better not go up to her. And I said, I'm sorry. And he said, she's married, so I better not go up to her. I said, I think you can talk to married women in an open space, and I don't think hitting on her is compulsory either. I have no idea where that mindset came from. Do you get that?
Funny. Yeah. It's like we're in Saudi Arabia or something.
Yeah, it was very, very odd.
And that's probably a little insulting to Saudi Arabia because I think even there maybe that's not that big of a deal.
I don't know. Yeah, and I just couldn't work it out because it wasn't like the person was so enamored with you because they were saying it quite calmly and rationally. Right. Yeah. It was like it was going to be offensive to, I don't know what it was.
I've had I've had people say I don't want to go into the whole elevator bullshit, but I've had some people say to me how dare that guy hit on her? Not, they usually don't say it to me. Usually they're saying it to others. How dare that guy hit on her? Didn't he know she was married? And I'm like, you have missed the point. I understand that you'd think you're on my side, but you're not.
That could be one point on the list, but it ain't near the top.
And I don't even think it's a point because I think that, marriage isn't about possession and I could flirt with people if I want, and so, I've been separated from my husband for several years now. I have a boyfriend who I love and I live with and for the past 2.5 years.
I knew that. I just didn't want to raise this with this guy to make it even more confusing for him.
Yeah, but that's the thing. thing, because that's not even the answer, isn't that she's not married. It's that it shouldn't matter because she's not owned by anyone, whether she's married or not. You know, you can go talk to a woman.
Yeah, and I was even looking at First Cause as to why he didn't think he could talk, why he was feeling this attraction for you. That was Wow.
Yeah, I do think it gets back to ownership. Not to put too fine a point on it, but I think it's this feeling that if a woman is married, that means that her husband gets to control her behaviors and her actions, and in this case, flirting with her, or in this guy's case, even talking to her apparently would seem suspect or
it was indeed very strange. Actually, what will be the topic of your next feminist lecture? Because you've done some really good ones.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, right now I'm doing a talk on the pseudoscience of things like how women evolved to shop, things that make it into our mainstream media.
Is it just going to touch on the cosmetic industry?
No, actually not really. I don't talk too much about the cosmetic industry. More like things that masquerade as science in the mainstream media. And so the average reader would maybe give it a bit more credibility than it actually deserves. Because when you look at the science, it's not necessarily there. A lot of these things are controlled by marketers, for instance. Particularly in the UK, this is an issue. Shopping mall, commissions a study to figure out why women shop and men don't.
This is what I find offensive, and I might just be overreacting here, but you see magazines and stuff, it's like women shop and it makes you feel better, and you're not actually sure what you're curing in the first place. That's kind of offensive.
Yeah, well, that's what most of marketing is about. You come up with a problem, invent a problem, and then sell her something to solve it. And it's starting to happen more with men as well. Men are starting to get into the crosshairs of advertisers more. But it's been happening with women a lot. And there's a great Mitchell and Webb sketch about this. Do you get Mitchell and Webb here?
Sorry, no.
Oh, okay. It's a sketch show, David Mitchell and somebody Webb. But anyway, they do a great sketch where they show a commercial with it's a woman standing there and they're like, woman, do your cramps hurt, and are you hideous, and do you need to lose weight, and what's wrong with your hair, and throwing all these products at her, and then they slide over and there's a man and they're like, men, everything's fine. You look great. Have a beer.
Move along there.
Right.
That's great. Look, finish with a recommendation for a website and a recommendation for a book. And I'm sorry, I'm really getting on your time here, but you have a lot to say, and I'm interested. Yeah, because a book. I mean, for me, I'm reading Bad Farmer at the moment. I'm finding that fascinating. Yeah. But I'm just wondering if there's a book and a website you'd like to recommend to us, because there's something you've found that maybe we haven't.
Oh man. Can I think about that for just a second?
Yeah, there's no problem with that.
Let me think. Because my problem is that I usually read several books at once because I read a lot of skeptical books, and sometimes I need to put it down and go read some fiction or something.
Yeah, look, my friend Susie Q, who is Miss Naked Australia and has a couple of degrees, she has the serious book and the not serious book. Yeah. A bit like Calvin Klein used to have the uppers on one side of the bed and the downers on the other side of the bed. You have the book on either side of the bed. And you balance it. Yeah.
All right. So right now, my fiction book is The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood, and I love it. It's fantastic so far. And my nonfiction book right now is called Moral Combat by Zikivu Hutchinson, and she is a prominent, amazing, intellectual black atheist woman in the U.S., and she is like a tour de force. She's angry and super smart and intimidating, and I adore her. So I'd recommend her book as well. So website, I just found a Tumblr that Twitter shames people.
Is that like Humble Brag?
Yeah, it's similar to Humble Brag. But what this person does is they find, usually it's younger dummies who are tweeting things like, people on welfare, why don't you just get a job? And then they go in their history and they find another tweet that says, need to get a job, where's mom with the pizza, things like that. And they put them together and post them, and there's a lot of really good schadenfreude.
Anderson Cooper did that with a reporter a couple of weeks ago. That they said something about, they said, why don't you really report what's going on in Gaza? And he put it back to them, well, maybe if you weren't talking about fruit flans so much and paying attention to the conflict, you'd know what's going on. It's a great idea.
Yeah, I love calling out hypocrisy. So that's really enjoyable. Wait, I should think of a good serious website to recommend. This isn't serious. Can I plug my article? I just had an article. I'm writing. I'm now occasionally writing for Slate at slate.com. And my most recent article
is this the same one that Phil Plate's on?
Yes, actually. Yeah, they've made this sudden push for the skeptics. They've snatched up a bunch of us.
Who are they? Who's behind them?
Slate is Slate's a prominent online magazine, so they're independent, I think. I don't think any larger media conglomerate owns them, but I could be wrong about that. But they're great. Their science editor, they've just got a new science editor, I think, and she wanted to get more skeptics on board. So Phil's whole blog is on Slate now. I'm just occasionally contributing articles, but my most recent one is about the pseudoscience in Sky Mall. So that's a lot of fun. I love Sky Mall.
That's one of my favourite parts of the Gizwiz, Leo Laporte's podcast. Crap I Bought in Sky Mall is a part of his show. And you can get union suits in psychedelic colours. You can get all sorts of things there. Is there stuff that only exists in Sky Mall? I mean, give us an example of one of the products you wrote about.
Okay, so there's so much pseudoscience that I decided to just focus on pet things. So, for instance, one thing was a thunder shirt. And this was like...
I wanted to do a story on this because I have only anecdotal evidence that it works. Does it?
Well, okay, so this is the most controversial thing in the whole article.
Oh, it is,
because, there are a lot of people who say it works, and then there's a lot of people who say it doesn't work, both of whom have bought it and tried it. So, apparently it does seem to work for some dogs and some cats even.
We'll just explain what it is. It's like a tight-fitting jacket that you put onto your dog. Do cats get into this? I'm about to say, I wouldn't think cats wouldn't have any bit of this. They'd be out of there.
Well, so my anecdotal evidence, I have two cats who are very floppy and codependent and don't understand how to fight predators and things. But
they can use a TV remote.
They can, actually. So one of them, Brendan, I thought it'd be funny to stick him in a shark costume. And so I put... It was made for dogs, but whatever. It was in the discount bin. So I put it on him. It was like a little hoodie with a little jaws over his head. And he immediately fell over and just laid there purring. And it didn't seem like... Sometimes cats purr when they're hurt or something, but he was really happy. He was rolling around and he loved it. I think he can't tell the difference between good attention and bad attention, but he does like being hugged. So at the time I was like, oh, maybe he likes it because it feels like a hug. And then I see the thunder shirt, and that's exactly what it claims to do for both dogs and cats. So I looked into it, and there's really no scientific evidence to suggest it works. There have been a few studies that have looked at similar things. There's this hug machine. I don't know if you're familiar with Temple Grandin, but she is an autistic woman from the U.S. who is brilliant, and she works for slaughterhouses, making them better for the cattle.
Hang on, now are you just making this up? Are you taking the piss at this stage? I told this Australian guy that there was this hug machine.
No. So there's this hug machine for cattle, and it's this giant machine, and it hugs them. And Temple Grandin got into the hug machine and found that she liked it a lot, and she thought that it could help autistic kids by providing this constant pressure on your body. And so now there are several centers for autistic children that use these things and claim to have good benefits, but the few scientific studies have only shown really marginal differences in the amount of stress that these supposedly cure. And so they're not really conclusive, and we're talking in this case about this large machine that applies constant even pressure all the time, as opposed to a little jacket. But the little jacket is selling itself based on those studies on the hug machine. They quote Temple Grandin on their website and stuff. So there's really no evidence to suggest it works. However, there's anecdotal evidence to suggest it works, because there are a lot of people saying it worked for my dog, or my cat. So, it's kind of up in the air. Who knows if it works? If you have a dog that's scared of the thunder, and you have $50 burning a hole in your pocket, then I say go ahead. Who cares? But personally, I'm going to stick with the shark costume because it cost me $5 in the discount bin, and does the same thing.
Look, Rebecca Watson, I've taken a lot of your time here at the conference today, and look, I'm just so happy that you make a living on your intelligence. It's great.
I make my living on something. I don't know if it's my intelligence. I think it's my polarization, right? That's what everybody keeps telling me.
That's worth
She's an attention whore for money.
It's worth a lazy 20.
I got blog money. That's right.
您现在收听的是 Skeptic Zone， 我是丽丝，我们的网址是 skeptoid.com.cn。 Skeptoid 是一个科学类 podcast 节目，我们每期都会讨论新的话题，包括探讨流行的传奇故事、阴谋论，或者是声称超自然的现象。您可以到 iTunes 的中文网站下载 Skeptoid， 或者是访问我们的网址skeptoid.com.cn. The Skeptoid Science Podcast by Brian Dunning is now available for Chinese audience. Please tell your Chinese friends to visit skeptoid.com.cn or find Skeptoid on the Chinese iTunes Store. I'm Li Si from skeptoid.com.cn.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Whew, I made it back just in time to finish off the show. That clam chowder was just heavenly. I love it. I love the old clam chowder in San Francisco. It's famous for it. I love the sourdough bowl as well. Eat the lot. On next week's show, more fantastic interviews from Maynard from Melbourne. Who can we line up? We might even have James Randi himself. Thank you again to those people who contribute to make the Skeptic Zone possible. Your little financial contributions go a very long way, I can promise you that. So we made it. We made it to the end of 2012. Oh well. Stuff ancient prophecy. I think I would rather have an exciting and interesting future. So until 2013, this is Richard Saunders signing off from the Bay Area, San Francisco.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.